Hello everyone, welcome to episode number 23 of the elevator chat series of our Canadian journey. I am your fellow passenger, Darshan As you may know, yesterday I wrote an article about the rapidly escalating diplomatic row between Canada and India, in which my main thrust was that the issue of the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar is, in addition to being a crime investigation, also a matter of Canada's geostrategic interests and obligations to the nations that are our allies. As can be expected, some of the responses to my article were negative. I don't see that as a problem, but what was disheartening about these responses was that the respondents were stuck in the argument that India killed a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. Of course, this has not been proved, but too many Canadians started believing it from the moment Prime Minister Trudeau made his statement in the Parliament on Monday. Even his own words did not amount to a categorical claim about India's involvement. But that doesn't stop many of us to infer that if Trudeau said it publicly, then it must be an incontrovertible fact. With this kind of tribal loyalty at play, one doesn't hope to get very far in discussing the matter with the loyalists. To make matters worse, this sentiment is not limited to the general public. And I use the term sentiment advisedly here because it is not the product of rational thought. Therefore, we see that even in political circles and more importantly in the media, where we would expect rational thinking to be the standard operating procedure, this sentiment abounds. I found the dilution of our collective IQ to be disconcerting. And as I mulled over the matter, I remembered that many years ago, the then NDP leader, Jack Layton, provided an example of how a nation should be approaching matters when geopolitical issues were concerned. The US-led war in Afghanistan was going down the tubes, with multiple stories each day of mayhem in various parts of that country. After their initial defeat, in conventional military terms it was a defeat, the Taliban had regrouped and were getting stronger by the day. Sane voices were rare in those days, in the West especially. The prevailing slogan was that we don't negotiate with terrorists. Especially for a politician, it was well nigh impossible to rise above this kind of jingoism without committing career suicide. But Jack Layton did have the courage to say openly that any resolution in Afghanistan was only possible via a negotiated settlement with the Taliban. He was widely pilloried for this statement and even got the label of Taliban Jack. Eventually, as we saw, stubborn unwillingness to negotiate with the Taliban resulted in the disastrous takeover of Afghanistan by the same Taliban. The key aspect for me in this chapter of history, or at least one of the key ones, was that there is this doctrine called responsibility to protect, or R2P for short. One of the foundational ideas of the doctrine is that in order to ensure post-conflict peace after a civil war, it is necessary to see to it that all the former belligerent groups have a stake in the new political order. The reasoning behind this was clear, that without this stake, the losing side would see it as humiliation and the post-conflict peace wouldn't last. In fact, the conflict wouldn't end unless the other side sees a possibility that they would have such a stake. In other words, the intransigence on our side would defeat our own desire for an end to the conflict. Jack Layton was, I am sure, coming from this angle, but he was widely ridiculed. The cruel irony here is that the doctrine of R2P is originally a Canadian idea presented to the UN and then fleshed out with the participation of other countries. So I would expect that appreciation of this whole idea would be more in Canada, but sadly that is not the case. I believe that this idea from R2P can be applied with modifications to other situations as well, especially in the arena of geopolitics, which is why I had intuitively thought of the Canada-India spat from a geostrategic perspective. It was only after I had reflected on the responses to my article that I remembered the Jack Layton episode of the war in Afghanistan and thence R2P. In a nutshell, handling successfully the issue of alleged Indian involvement in the killing of Niger requires that we incorporate the R2P idea in our approach. That trying to prevail over our adversary will be seen by the other side as humiliation, which will only harden their stance and they will dig their heels in. As a result, we will not only not be able to resolve the case of Niger's murder, but we will also invite negative consequences for a lot of Canadians resulting from the escalating tit-for-tat measures by the two countries. There will be negative consequences for Canada as well as a country. Our strained relations with a geopolitically important country will create friction between our goal in this case on one hand and our allies' strategic needs on the other. We will force them to choose, and sometimes we may not like their choice. At least that is how I see this situation. Let me know what you think. I will look forward to your response in the comments. Until we meet again, goodbye and be well.